Funky. It's all very high tech, isn't it? Got it. Woohoo! Right. Am I all right to say hello, kick off? Or are you just in there? I am recording it on Zoom. The only person I get in that is on the Zoom camera now, so nobody else is checking. Okay. Do you want to one day look? Can you see me here? There's all sorts of video in there. Yeah. Okay. Funky little piece of stuff, isn't it? Right. Thank you very much, everybody, for waiting as well. So we're covering all sides. So obviously we're really happy to have Joanna with us today. Obviously looking at the forest bathing subject, which, to be honest, I thought was going in a pool or a lake in the forest, and then I realised no, it's actually just being in the forest. And I think a lot of people might think that. So, but obviously there is actually a very long history of the benefits. So I'm sure she will tell us all about it and her links in that area, and hopefully we'll go away with a few tips that we might want to do in the future. So hopefully on a more cheerful day than today. So hope you enjoy, and I'm sure we'll have a bit of discussion later when we have a chance. So thank you, Joanna. Your hand over.
Thank you, Amy. So yes, I got very wet on my way here. So, that is a little bit of a thing that happens to us a lot. Okay, so today's talk is called Forest Bathing, Finding Harmony in Nature. And exactly as Amy said, there is no swimming involved. The bathing is like sunbathing. So we're bathing in the atmosphere of the woods, but we'll tell you a lot more by the end of this session. You'll know all about what it is. Okay, so first of all, Harmony in Nature is the name of a company that I run together with my colleague here, Katie. And we are both qualified forest bathers. We run nature connections at the Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary, which is in Shear, if any of you know that, Burrows-Lee near Shear. We work at Newlands Corner as well. And earlier this year, we very excitingly ran a 6-week course for Mind in Woking. And this was, we'll talk about this again a little bit later in the presentation, but this was something that we were doing as part of a survey for the University of Derby. So they've been looking at the well-being of the participants at the beginning, during and after the course. And the forthcoming results are not out yet, but the preliminary results look very exciting indeed. And together we've run events at West Horsley Place, various RSPB locations around the UK, actually, not even locally, all of them, National Trust and Kew Gardens as well. And we're always looking for new Surrey Hills sites. We've actually got one in Cosmon Sanctuary as well, a recent one, which is in Tadworth, kind of Dorking area. Okay, so you're thinking, what exactly is forest bathing? It's not swimming. And here's what it is. It's about walking in or viewing the forest while taking in the atmosphere through the senses. Research by Dr. Ching Li from 2018. And in Japan, where he's based, it would be considered a guided or an unguided walk using mindful awareness through the senses. So when we say through the senses, we're really talking about sight, sound, touch, smell, and even taste, if we can fit that into the session. And this is enabling us to pay close connection to the forest in a way that you don't get if you're literally just walking through and not engaging in any specific way. The sort of sensory tasks that we might be including could be touching tree bark, it could be smelling mosses or leaf litter, it could be observing light and shade through the trees or other foliage, in fact, different colours and patterns. And we could be listening to the wind through the trees or perhaps birdsong. And some providers, by that I mean some forest bathing guides, might include wider mindful practices such as deep breathing, themed activities, meditation, yoga, or even bushcraft, which is sort of making wickerwork and such like. So it's become quite a popular thing only in the last few years here in the UK, but it's got a much longer history elsewhere. So it's really a guided walk which enables the brain and the mind to take a break, and we're encouraging you to let your senses take over. Very experiential. The origin, some of you may know, it's called Shinrin-Yoku, and it began in Japan some 40 years ago. So back in the 80s, Japan was really struggling with a health issue. And what had happened was all these very, very populated conurbations had been set up, and they were noticing that the well-being of the inhabitants was failing. And Japan is an interesting country. They have a belief system called Shinto. We could describe it as a religion, but it's a little bit different to a religion. But it's basically a kind of reverence for things, particularly reverence for nature, but also man-made buildings as well. But this reverence for nature gave them a starting point, if you like, when they were starting to think about where can we address this? How can we overcome this health crisis? Then they wanted to look at nature first. And handily for Japan, 70% of it is woodland. And, you know, jumping forward 40 years, because we were talking about the 80s there where it all started, they now have 64 forests that are designated for forest bathing use. So that's how far it's developed, if you like, within Japan itself. And also in Japan, there's extensive medical and university research. So way back in the 80s, when they first started this movement, the government decided to invest not just finances, but also some really key medical research players. And with the 40 years of studies that they have, excitingly, they've been able to demonstrate that these are some typical outcomes that you might expect from a forest bathing session. It should lower your blood sugar, and it should regulate your blood pressure. Most people have high blood pressure, and therefore what we would expect it to bring that blood pressure down. But excitingly, the research shows if you go into the forest with low blood pressure, it actually brings it up. So there's something really fascinating going on here, that it is, as I said, regulating and balancing rather than just reducing the blood pressure. It decreases your cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and it reduces fatigue. It reduces anxiety, depression, and rumination. Rumination, if you're not sure what it is when thoughts go round and round in your mind and you can't get out of the cycle. And it's something that a lot of very stressed workers suffer from, but actually anybody can struggle with it from time to time. It improves respiratory function. It benefits the heart and circulatory issues. And really excitingly, it enhances the immune system. And how it does that, or one of the ways it does that, because there's more than one way in fact, but it increases your NK cells, which stands for natural killer cells. And you may well be wondering, why would I want to enhance my natural killer cells? But they are the scavengers that work around the body, fighting against infection, bacteria, fungal, anything really, viral. So they really are a key part of our immune progress. And the fact that we can increase that is very beneficial. The research has also shown that it does increase your strange noise coming from, so I'm not sure where it's coming from. It should increase the cancer fighting proteins as well. So that's a really exciting finding. And it boosts focus and memory capacity. So this is what leads us to believe that anybody could benefit, whether you're a stressed worker or whether you're a member of the public, a family person, just somebody who's struggling with loneliness, or everybody can benefit really. And another exciting development is prescribed by some doctors. So in Japan, it's been prescribed by some doctors for a fair amount of time, but here in the UK, it's quite new. But we do have some Guildford and Surrey GPs on board who have agreed to give green prescription for it, but it is in the early days. Okay, so some of you will know what this means, the sympathetic nervous system. I'll come to it in a moment. But what I'd like to just focus on, and why I'm going to be talking about that, is this is a pretty impressive list. Oh, sorry, pressed the wrong button. This is a pretty impressive list of benefits, isn't it? So it's almost too good to be true, would you say? Perhaps you're thinking that, perhaps you're not. I don't think this is the only modality that would help all those things, because what we're really talking about here, the magic bullet, if you like, is about moving your, what we call autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system can be in two different modes. It can be in the sympathetic or it can be in the parasympathetic. And the sympathetic is sometimes known as the fight or flight. I'll speak about that a little bit more in a moment. And the parasympathetic is often known as the rest and recuperate. So if you can be moved from the fight and flight into the rest and recuperate, then lots and lots of issues in your body just self-resolve. It's as simple as that. Your body just has time and effort to balance you again. And lots of other things might also do that. I would say martial arts can, yoga, all sorts of things can. So it's not the only modality that can help. But what's great about it is it's a very easy resource, especially here where we have so much woodland. So let me just talk a little bit about the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and forgive me if some of you know a lot about it already. But the sympathetic nervous system is what a lot of us are in most of the time, which isn't great. Okay, sounds good, doesn't it? Sympathetic sounds really good, and it does have its uses. So if you were about to go on stage and play Juliet or something in a Shakespeare play, you might get a really strong sense of butterflies and nerves, as we call it. And actually, although it's uncomfortable in the moment, it's actually bringing out the best in you, because the sympathetic nervous system really helps you to focus and remember things and to consider answers to problems. It's a really good problem-solving mode to be in. So it does have its benefits, but it's very much designed for a short-term emergency. So examples are often used for this, and the example that we're going to use here now is I'm going to just talk about a wild boar. So we're talking about short-term fight, flight, or freeze, and it's got new names now, but those are the main three. So thousands of years ago, if you were living in the woods, perhaps, and a wild boar came along, your body would have to make some decisions for you. And what would happen is your body would think, all that matters is that you survive another 12, 24, maybe 48 hours. Otherwise, everything's not going to matter. And in that time, what we really need you to do is either be able to run really fast to have a chance of running away from this wild boar, or bring all your strength to your muscles, so pump more blood through all your body and enable you to have a chance to fight whatever is the problem, in this case the wild boar. Or perhaps you might freeze, not move at all, and hope that the boar doesn't notice you and goes away, because actually some animals do respond to movements. Some smell and whatever, they would still notice you, but the ones that are only responding to vision might actually not notice that you're there if you stand still. So your body makes that immediate decision on your behalf. And all it cares about is that you survive this encounter with the wild boar. So in order to process more blood to the body, give you really good thinking skills, you might decide you want to run up a tree or something, so you've got to be able to think clearly. All of those functions that might help you survive the moment don't require your body to be doing the less important functions. So your body literally wires you around your reproductive system, your immune system, your sleep program, and your digestive system. So in the moment, when your body is deciding, shall I survive this boar, it doesn't really care if you've digested your lunch or if you're fighting that little bug that you picked up in the morning. So it's programming everything into that short-term solution. And that's great if it is only a short-term thing. The problem is that our lifestyle produces a kind of false stress, if you like, a false anxiety over our survival. And therefore, we end up in this mode for far too long. We should actually only be in it for about 20% of the time and 80% in the rest and recuperate. But we end up the reverse of that. So we're 80% of the time in this mode, which is not good. If you can imagine that you are bypassing your immune system, so you might be looking at a compromised immune system, you might have IBS or other digestive issues, and your cell repair and renewal is not really happening. And of course, if your sleep cycle is being bypassed, you might be struggling with insomnia as well. So what we really want you to do is to move into this parasympathetic mode. And that's where your body, as I said before, rests and recuperates. And forest bathing and other modalities help to achieve this state. And as a result...
I'm not taking pictures, I just read translations.
It's fine. And the other thing is, I mean, there are, as I've said, it's not the only modality that would do this, but the research in Japan has indicated that 50% of the benefit comes from the chemicals that come off the trees. And you do get chemicals off all living plants, not just trees, but the benefit of trees is because they're above you, they tend to land on your skin and land on your head, and you breathe them in more regularly than you would if it was just at knee level, say. So this is one of the fantastic things about forest bathing. And the research from Qing found this out by replicating the kind of chemical mix in the air from a forest where some people were actually going out in the forest, and another control group received this same mixture of chemicals pumped into their hotel room. And from that, they determined that 50% of the benefits was coming from that only, that directly, if you like. Of course, if any of you remember doing biology at school, you will also know that if we have sunshine and it's the summer and we've got green leaves, those leaves will be taking the carbon dioxide out of the air and giving you oxygen. And that's even another benefit that we're going to be receiving when we're out in the woodlands, which those control groups wouldn't have been getting in the hotel room. So we can genuinely say that it's more than 50% of the benefit comes from the trees themselves. Okay, so Surrey Hills, we're so lucky to have those near us. What do you think is the percentage of forest in England? Anyone got any idea? Remember that it was about 70% in Japan. Anybody have any ideas? Yes? 15? Any change on 15? 30? Well, sadly, it's about 7. Yes, very, very low. And in fact, not 2% of the 7, but 2% of England is ancient woodland. And ancient woodland in the UK is considered woodland that's been documented for sole use as woodland for at least 400 years. And that's, I mean, it could be a lot older, and probably often is, but obviously nobody before the Tudors really noted where we had woodland. So we've only got a very small amount of ancient woodland, and this is the best environment because you have a big variety of trees, and the trees are very established. And from the point of view of the chemicals coming off the trees, which are called phytoncides, by the way, we get a bigger variety of phytoncides if we get a bigger variety of trees, bigger types of trees. So ancient woodland is the best, but all woodland, and indeed all outdoors in nature, is beneficial. Now, the good news for us is that Surrey is the most wooded county in England. We have about 23% woodland here, and quite a bit of it is ancient woodland, actually. So we do well on the ancient woodland count. And furthermore, Surrey Hills itself has a really high percentage of AONB, which stands for Areas of Outstanding Natural Beauty, which have been recognised by the local and the national government bodies, if you like, have recognised those areas. And SSSI is Sites of Special Scientific Interest, and we have those as well. So we're very well positioned, if you like, to be utilising forest bathing in our county here for health and well-being. Forestry England did a document called Forests for Wellbeing, and that outlined the importance of forests as natural resources for both mental well-being and, in fact, physical well-being as well. But I think the mental well-being is something that the press and media have really latched onto, but it really is more than that. You don't have to have mental health issues to benefit at all. It's good all round. And as I've already said, we do actually have permission from social prescription through Surrey County Council, and that's via the mental health charities through the Forest Bathing Institute. And this is how Katie and I were working with Woking Mind, and we've also worked with Catalyst as well, which is a Guildford charity. Of course, one of the issues we have, as we've pointed out today, is the weather can be very unpredictable in the UK, so we do have to cope with that. And it's frustrating for us when it's really, really heavy rain, but we do carry on because they do bring some really fantastic sensory opportunities. The thing is, you have to be properly dressed for it. So if any of you in the audience here have a dog, you will know that you can survive going out in the rain, because you have to go out in all weathers if you have a dog. But what we don't work in is heavy winds. And depending on how well maintained the site is where we're working, sometimes the cutoff will be 25 miles an hour, sometimes it'll be 30 miles an hour. And we wouldn't operate if there was electrical storms, because these are dangerous. But in rain, we go ahead. And often we really enjoy a bit of rain, actually. As I say, it's about being properly dressed for it. So within England, we have here the Forest Bathing Institute, which used to be based very near here. It's just moved down to Sussex. But they have brought in something, or pioneered something that they call Forest Bathing Plus. And that includes guided sensory mindfulness practices, a meditative tree relaxation, which I think is a really good name, group sharing opportunities. And we also, in our sessions, talk about an educational element, including scientific research. And we introduce you to something called the Wood Wide Web, which I'm going to mention now. So just to talk a little bit more about the Forest Bathing Institute. So they discovered, if you like, that forest bathing was very successful in Japan already. And indeed, that's not the only country where it's been happening for a long time. It's just that they were the first, really. It's very big in Korea, and quite well received also in America, and lots of Europe as well, particularly Sweden and Norway and the Scandinavian countries. And part of the reason for that, particularly in Finland actually, is that they have very, very short daylight hours in the winter. And as a result of that, they do struggle with mental health. And they have, sadly, a very high suicide rate there as well. So they have invested lots of money in ways that they can address their mental health issues. And forest bathing is something that they've decided to back and to develop. But here in the UK, it's still relatively new. Forest Bathing Institute started offering forest bathing in about 2016. And I think there were one or two other companies within the UK that started up at around the same time, but that's relatively recent. We're looking at, 6 years. And in the first year or two, they really struggled to get any media interest at all. However, in 2018, I don't know what to call her now. Well, she was Kate Middleton, but of course now she's the Princess of Wales. She decided to have a forest bathing garden at Chelsea Flower Show. And I'm not sure how much she had to do with the design of it, but she certainly endorsed it, and she was very present at the launch. And as a result of that, there was a complete media frenzy over what was forest bathing. And luckily for us, it sort of started the ball rolling. Lots of media outlets then wanted to know more. And in the same year, we had quite a few other media coverages, because we had a series on Japan, actually, by Sue Perkins, which featured a whole episode, was pretty much about forest bathing. And also Gardener's Weekly, is it called? Gardener's World, thank you, Gardener's World. They featured a whole programme on wellbeing through gardening. And as part of that, they also talked about forest bathing and spent a little bit of time on it there. So that was all in the same year of 2018. So we suddenly got a bit of a boost, which was rather handy. Now, TFBI, who are run by Gary and Olga, they foresaw that if we wanted our UK doctors to prescribe forest bathing as a social prescription, they would need to have research that was actually carried out here in the UK. Even though the Japanese research is fantastic and very significant, we do have different climate and different types of trees, less forests, etc. So he foresaw that we needed to get started with some research here. And in fact, the University of Derby was one of the first universities to get involved, and they have produced the first survey. They're working with us about the Mind one, a 6-week course, but before that, they had already produced their first survey and study on forest bathing generally. It was very, very positive. And what they did slightly differently to Japan was they actually worked with something that measured heart rate variability. That's the gap between your heartbeat. And if the gap is longer, it means that you're more relaxed. It's simple as that. So the beauty of measuring that throughout the session is that they were able to determine which exact part of the session was the most beneficial. And interestingly, these were the points that they came up with. They found that the tree relaxation, no prizes for guessing, relaxing under a tree, basically. And we do give you a kind of guided relaxation we talk you through as well. And that could be anything from 10 minutes to 20 minutes at the end of the session, depending on the weather, really. And they found that the group sharing opportunities were really beneficial. So during one of our sessions, we do invite participants to not talk. So when we're actually engaged on a smell exercise or a visual exercise, we try and enable you to really immerse yourself in that experience by not just chatting with whoever's standing next to you. And that's a standard mindfulness type of technique anyway. But every 2 or 3 times we do a little sensory practice, then we would get everybody together and invite you to share what you noticed. And it could be something you enjoyed, it could be something you didn't really like, that's fine too. But the process of everybody sharing, which is optional, but it seems to be very well received by the heart rate variability monitor. So basically, listening to other people's experiences calms us down. And I guess it also enables us to spot something that we might have missed ourselves next time. And it brings the group together cohesively as well. So it has lots of benefits, but it's something that as a result of that research, we make sure that we do include it in our sessions. The educational element, which isn't usually included in Japan either, talks about this research by Suzanne Simard. Has anybody heard of her, by the way, here? No? Because again, as part of this sudden social media interest, or media interest, the Netflix have done a series called Fantastic Fungi, which I have to say, the title doesn't thrill me, but it is actually a really, really interesting program. And in that they do talk about this, the Wood Wide Web. So Suzanne Simard was a researcher, or is a researcher in British Columbia in Canada, and she came from a family of foresters, and she was asked to investigate why man-made forests, which are manually planted, don't seem to have such good resistance to pests as natural woodland. And as part of her research, she discovered something quite outstanding, and that was that plants basically talk to each other. And we didn't realise that, or I think most of us just assumed that plants were all insular and, you know, really they're solitary living beings. But in fact, their roots going down underneath, which we always knew were there. And if you think about it, I'm sure we all realise that those roots would have been overlapping with the roots of neighbouring trees. They couldn't not, because, you know, trees are quite close together and they have to have quite extensive roots to balance their upward branches. So we always knew they were overlapping, but what we didn't realise is that they're connected by a type of fungus called mycorrhizae, little filaments, and these fungal filaments enable the plants to actually send messages to each other. And those messages could be, I'm being attacked by a beetle, I've changed the taste of my leaves by adding a little bit more tannin, so they're a bit more bitter, the beetle doesn't like it, the beetle has left, so I suggest that you get ready, change your, your leaf taste now, and the beetle may not attack you. I'm sure they probably don't do it in those words or in English, but they get the message across. And what we've noticed from the research is that the beetle, when it leaves that plant, it doesn't actually go to any of the immediately neighbouring plants, it goes further afield. So it's very, very exciting research. And the thing is that whatever they're communicating, it is different if it's a beetle to if it's something else, if it's a fungal infection, etc. So they've obviously got a very sophisticated language that they're able to communicate with each other. Now, they communicate through this, which has now become known as the Wood Wide Web, which is, I don't know that Suzanne actually came up with that term, but she's certainly credited with it because it was really her research that brought it to everybody's attention. And so the Wood Wide Web is one way that they can communicate, But they can also communicate with the phytoncides, the chemicals I mentioned in the beginning that come off the trees, and they come off the leaves, they come off the flowers, they come off the fruits, the bark, and they come in through our skin, through our respiration. And in fact, anything that isn't taken in ends up locked up in the soil, and it comes out again the next time it rains and there's a bit of sunshine. So you may have noticed on a day when it has rained and then there's a bit of sun, the smells are particularly strong. Have you noticed that, perhaps? And that's why. So these phytoncides are another way of communicating. So we like to say that they've got their own Wi-Fi as well. So they haven't just got their Wood Wide Web. They've got their own Wi-Fi with their phytoncides. And the funny thing is, phytoncides, the word "side" actually means death. So because obviously they're trying to use them to keep the pests away. And the irony is that humans are probably the biggest pests that trees need to worry about, and these phytoncides are actually good for us. So they got it a bit wrong there. But having said that, they really do have a very sophisticated way of communicating, which is extremely exciting. Okay, so yes, if we train with Forest Bathing Institute, which Katie and I did, and we like to say that we trained with the FBI, because not many people in the UK can say that. But as part of that, we had to be mindfulness and meditation teachers as well as capable guides. So we incorporate all of these extras into our sessions, if you like. And as I've already said, TFBI or Forest Bathing Institute are very good thinking in their communication with the universities. So although Derby University was the first university to get on board, there are now something like 22 universities working with them. And as part of that, this has led to the NHS trials and the Surrey GPs, as we've said. So they really are moving forward. And it was really their initiative that put forward this 6-week training with the charities that we've been working with, which is separately being investigated by the UK universities as well. Okay, so we've talked about the principles, tried to give you a little insight into the amazing things that go on in the woods. So we're just going to look now quickly at how we might work with the sensory practices that we were talking about. Can any of you see what might be interesting about that tree? It's knobbly, yes, that's true.
Trunk coming out of it.
Yes.
It's not one tree.
Exactly, well done, yes. This tree is separate to this tree. This is from Newlands Corner, actually. So this tree is a yew, and this tree is a holly. And if you actually look in that little hole there, you can see the roots of this. It's quite amazing. So this is the sort of thing that, no offence meant, but 99% of people would probably walk past and not notice that. So the idea of what we're doing is to draw your attention to the amazing beauty that might be right there, but we hadn't noticed it. So this is a beautiful view. In fact, it's taken from Harry Edwards, but there are some outstanding views at Newlands Corner as well. So if we were working on a site like that with views, and again, you know, we have 3 hours to do a session, but the tools between us would be way, way, way more than 3 hours. So we just pull out the tools on the day that work with the group and with the environment and the weather. But one of the things we can do with a view like that is spend some time looking at the close-up and the further afield and then the really distant and then coming back. That's actually really, really good for your eyes as well. So again, working on vision, we could be looking for something like this, which is a form of fungus, and this one's called chicken in the woods. It's actually edible, but don't go eating it without knowing what you're doing. You can see Katie is investigating it there. And this is just an example of how you can get some beautiful effects of the sunlight just breaking through the trees. And there is actually somebody walking there. My daughter's walking there. It's quite hard to see her. But if you were walking towards that, you would get a really lovely effect. You know, maybe almost too much. Okay. So here are some other lights and shades that you can see. And with this particular one, again, if you looked closely, you can see how interesting the serrations are on the edge of that leaf. So sometimes we would combine visual exercises with getting you to look closely at textures as well. So in this instance, we may look very closely at the textures of these leaves as well. And now, really importantly, is the listening. And one of the most amazing things actually is listening to rain. So if we do have a session where it rains a lot, one of the things we would like to do is actually spend some time listening to it. And there's something very relaxing for the brain about what's described as white noise. So white noise is something that doesn't have much regular frequency or anything. It's just kind of background, lots of frequencies and lots of durations of sound all happening at once. And rain is a very good example of that. In fact, if any of you have struggled with insomnia or you know people who do, you can get CDs of the sound of rain or the sound of waves breaking on the beach. And many people find that's extremely helpful for falling asleep. But that it's about the fact that those white noise sounds really make our brains feel comfortable and content, and hence they have a relaxing effect. Of course, another sound that we can hear in nature that's very good for us is the sound of bird song. So if we didn't have any rain on a particular event, but we did have, sometimes you can have wind rustling through the trees as well, that can be really, really beneficial. And also we can hear really well with bird sound that has a relaxing effect. And apparently it's because our brains, we have like a very similar brain, believe it or not, because we are derived from birds. We come from the same, go back far enough in history, we had the same ancestors. And so there's something about bird song that is musical to our ears. And the fact that when they're singing, they realise there isn't any danger. It's a very different sound coming from birds when they're upset and worried, and they start squawking, to when they're singing. So our brains realise that when they're singing, there's no danger, or at least no danger as far as the bird's concerned. So here we can just do a little exercise to show you how you can enhance your sense of hearing. And this is typical of the things that we do in a session, is we try and work with exercises to help you engage, if you like, more directly with your senses and enhance them. So something you may have even done as a child, or you notice with elderly people who are hard of hearing, they sometimes kind of put a little, almost like a homemade trumpet to their ear. Now, if you want to have a go with that, basically you just cup your hands together and close together all of the fingers. And then if you hook it behind your ears and just slightly pull your ears forward, not too far, because if you do it too much, you block the sound off. But you may notice, if you experiment with it, that the volume of my voice really changes when you're doing it to when you're not doing it. So it's a very simple tool and quite a fun one to take away. And it works really, really well with wind in the trees, and actually also with rain. And we found that if you're standing with, say, a waterfall or a stream behind you, you can do it directionally. So you can actually go like that, and it blocks out the sound from in front of you and really enhances the sound behind you. Really good technique if you're a teacher and you want to know what the students are saying about you. But it's directional, and lots of you can do it like this, you can do it like this, and of course you can do this version and lift your head back. So there's lots of different ways that you can work with that. I really would recommend that you try that yourselves and see what benefits it will bring. And in fact, we had somebody on a session, I think a couple of months ago, who was really struggling with their hearing, and she got in touch with us and said she was just finding it was an amazing thing on a day-to-day basis to just help her with her hard of hearing problem. So pass it on.
I have noticed that if you're watching television, sometimes it goes soft and loud. If you do that, it's much louder. I have noticed that myself.
Excellent, thank you. Well, there you are. Yes, a little tool to share, as we've said. Thank you for that. Okay, so this is something that could be visual or textural. So again, if it had rained, it's just really beautiful when you look at these droplets on the leaves. And this would tell you that we've probably got quite a waxy texture on this leaf, and hence it's just forming droplets and not actually sinking in. And this leaf is waxy as well. Can you see? More difficult to see, but you can just see here that the leaves are are slightly covered in droplets. And of course, if we were very fortunate and the sun were to come out on one of these occasions when we had the drops like that, we would get some beautiful spectrums showing as the sunlight hits the water. So a very, very simple thing, no cost involved, and yet, you know, nature's beauty, if you like, nature's entertainment. Okay. So here's Katie feeling some bark. Now, just to clarify, tree hugging is optional on forest bathing sessions, not a requirement, but we do have some who are very keen. And in fact, this lovely lady here has been on several sessions with us, and she does like to get her arms round a nice tree. But in fact, some recent research, I think you were telling me about it, Katie, is that the trees respond apparently, because they've been doing some research about what happens inside the tree when this is happening, and that the research indicates the tree really likes it. So it's a two-way thing.
Yeah, I think it was like this.
I thought the tree would say, hey, don't touch me.
No, it doesn't. No,
They measured before we
Yes.
did it and then after, and they found that its energy field had expanded.
So it does appear to be responding in a positive way. And the thing is, obviously, some people find it very positive for them as well. So, you know, I'm meaning it when I say it's optional, because some people would be very uncomfortable with doing that. But if it is something you've always wanted to try, and it's a very safe space to do it on one of our sessions.
Although the Finnish Forestry Service did recommend it.
They did, yes. In 2020, during isolation, the Finnish Forestry Commission, in Finland, of course, actually suggested that as people couldn't go and hug other people, that they should go and hug a tree. So they definitely recognised it. And in reality, the really interesting and amazing thing about doing that is that trees are obviously extremely unjudgmental. So if you do have a real issue going on in your mind, whether it's financial problems or emotional or mental health issues, you can literally go and tell the tree, and the tree is not going to judge you for what you've said. So you can tell it anything. And, you know, there's something therapeutic about just offloading it, to be honest. So maybe it would work just as well if you were offloading it to your bedroom wall, I don't know. But because a tree is a living being, some people seem to find that even more beneficial. Okay. So here's me sniffing a tree. So seems strange, but as part of our smell exercises, we would do that. And in fact, on every session, unless we really are in a location where it wouldn't work, one of the highlights, would you believe, you have to come along to understand why, one of the highlights is soil sniffing, right? Which you probably did all the time as a child when you were completely covered in soil and you smelled of it without even realising. And of course, we're not talking about breathing up the soil itself, that wouldn't be good, but the smell from the soil is very beneficial. It carries a positive bacteria, which helps our immune system. And it also, believe it or not, releases oxytocin in the body, which is the happiness, love hormone. So it genuinely does make you feel good. So that's a fun thing to do as well. Now, we've brought with us today some rosemary, actually. But I mean, anything strong would work here. So if anybody would like to just take a little piece of rosemary from us, and those of you on the Zoom at home, if you did manage to grab yourself some herb or something strong smelling, then we're just going to show you a couple of exercises for enhancing your sense of smell. Would you like one, Amy? I want to go right to the back there. So this is from my garden, picked this morning, and I'm sure it's a herb that you're very familiar with, maybe as a fresh or as a dried herb. And some of you may really not have a problem smelling it without any help at all from enhancing exercises. But if you want to try a couple of the techniques for seeing if it makes it stronger, two that we can give you straight away. One is learning from animals. So if you have a cat or a dog at home, or if you have any in the family at all, you may have noticed that when they're smelling something, they tend to do 3 or 4 short, sharp sniffs. And sometimes that will be followed by one long one. So something like this. Or you can just do multiple short sniffs if you want. And you may find that helps you take in more of the smell. And that's partly just because it does increase the volume, if you like, of smell molecules that you're taking up your nose. That's very simple. And if any of you have lost your sense of smell over the last couple of years, then these are really good exercises to do regularly. Really, I would say once a day to get out 2 or 3 strong smelling things. And a herb is a good one, lemon is another good one, mint is good. It could even be perfume or, you know, a selection of things. And really, once a day or twice a day, morning and evening, try and do these exercises with it to see if you can build your sense of smell back up. And the other thing you can do is to open your sinuses. So the sinuses are under this bone here on both sides. And so it's a very soft thing. It's not harsh. You're not pressing or pushing really, but just very softly. If you put your middle finger either side of your nose here, and you just lift the skin slightly up and slightly out, and that's opening the sinus itself. So if you're doing that, it's quite hard to do it and be sniffing at the same time. But if you've got it, you probably could do it actually just with it in your hand and just do that with it cupped in your hand. And that will also increase the sense of smell. A good thing to try outside, because if you're in an environment which has a smell, you're not having to hold the item as well, then it's a bit easier to work with. But they're very useful little skills. Okay. So moving on to our tree relaxation. So our tree relaxation would be, as I said, towards the end of the session to try and help wind you down. And here we would be suggesting that you lie down if you're comfortable with that, ideally under a canopy of trees, so that when you look up you can see the trees from below, which is really relaxing and lovely. And then we do a little, depending on again the day and the audience, we choose a little guided relaxation to do with you, which you can do with your eyes open or shut. And that would be how we would close the session with the practical side. And then we would just finish with a quick wash and wrap up, if you like, about how you can connect more regularly with the outdoors at home, which I'm going to leave until the end of this presentation. Okay, so here's some other breath work that you might like to work with and have a go at and take home and use. So controlling our breath, I should have said this before actually, it's our opinion that, it's my opinion, that the way that we manage to move you when you come on a forest bathing session, or when one comes on a forest bathing session, the process of moving the participant from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic, so from the fight and flight to the rest and recuperate, the key is your breath. And that's because lots of things happen in your body. You know, we talked about the autonomic nervous system. So there's lots of things that are happening that you're not aware of. So you don't think about digesting your food from earlier. You don't think about breathing, mostly. Most people don't. These are all automatic things. But the breath is one thing that we can actually actively think about breathing and change the way that we breathe. We can extend or speed up our breath. And it seems that that process can be a trigger of moving you from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. So it's a very good tool to work with. And if we were outside in the forest, we would probably start with the smell exercise. And we would start by having you, if you want to, you can do it now. You stand up and you just try and get a good sense of balance. And then literally just take some deep breaths in through the nostrils and feeling that energy going downwards. So simple thing, but we're just actively, mentally connecting with the process of breathing. So controlling our breath can control our emotions and energy levels as well. And we talked about smells a little bit. And in fact, what I didn't say is that when you smell something, the smell receptors inside your brain are the very, very early prehistoric parts of your brain as well, the limbic system. And that means it has a direct link back to memories. And hence, sometimes a smell can be very, very evocative for people and bring back strong memories from their past. So with regard to the nose, we can actually work, as I said, with the out breath. And in fact, what is really helpful is to know that if you extend your out breath a little bit more than your in breath, that itself is very relaxing. Not everybody finds it easy to breathe to a count. So I won't necessarily suggest that you do that. If you're comfortable with it, you can. But for my example, if I breathe in for the count of 2 and breathe out for the count of 3, that is relaxing. So, and a process over time of just spending that extra little bit of time on the out breath versus the in breath, that has a relaxing effect on us. If we want to be even simpler than that, we can play with breathing through one or other nostril. And if we breathe through the left nostril, so that means block the right nostril and just breathe through the left nostril, that is calming and cooling. So a good thing to do if you're hot, and obviously a very good thing to do if you're feeling worked up about something. I remember it by left being 4 letters and calm being 4 letters. Then if you work with your right nostril, that's energizing. So if you block your left nostril and work with your right nostril, breathe, that's energizing. So again, a simple technique you can play with over time. The yoga profession talk about the moon breath and the sun breath, or solar breath, but you don't need to call it that. But yes, again, something you can try when you're struggling to sleep is to just breathe in and out through your left nostril. Okay, here's some ideas of things you can take away with you. Fill your house with living plants. In fact, NASA have a website of plants that they recommend because they would produce the best possible chemicals for you. And obviously, if you have a garden, if you're lucky enough to have a garden, try and use it more often. Even if you only go out for 5 or 10 minutes every day, that can be very, very beneficial. If you're comfortable with taking your shoes and socks off and actually sitting, if you've got any grass, putting your feet on the grass for 10 to 20 minutes, that can be extremely beneficial. It's something called grounding or earthing. And the body over time in our society builds up what we call a positive, trying to think of the word for it. Charge, thank you, positive charge. Sounds good, again, like the sympathetic, isn't it? Positive sounds good, positive. It's actually not very good for us, but we get it very much off computer screens and iPhones and so on, well, any phones. So by going outside and connecting directly with nature, you have to have 2 forms of contact, so it can be both feet, it can be 1 hand, 1 foot, 2 hands, or whatever. And then we release that positive charge into the earth, and we receive a negative charge from the earth. And in fact, that negative charge is featured when you go round a waterfall. There's negative ions that come off waterfalls and around the sea as well. So all that ozone that comes off the sea, and that's part of the reason why we always feel really good when we're in close proximity to a waterfall or the sea. So we can embrace our weather. We have to do that here because our weather is so unpredictable. We get used to having this sensory connection with the weather, we can really turn it to our advantage. And try and encourage yourself to have a nature walk daily, or at least weekly, and that can make a big difference. The ideal from the research is 2 to 3 hours in woodland every 2 to 4 weeks, because when you do a session in woodland, what happens is that immune boost, the increase in the natural killer cells that I talked about, the NK cells, that carries on after you've left the woodland, and then it reaches a point where it plateaus for about 2 weeks, and then it starts to drop off over the next 2 weeks, so that a month after you went out, you're back to where you started. But you're going to get at least a 2-week benefit, and if you were to go out within 2 weeks, then you would never have that fall down. You would always keep that benefit alive, which is worth knowing. Obviously, one thing you can do if you don't have a garden or anything is go into a park, or you can even volunteer at a local garden place. I mean, we've got some local parks here. Of course, we're very close to the Royal Horticultural Society, Wisley headquarters, and some National Trust sites as well. So lots of places that you can go if you want to. And the research has also indicated that if you spend 48 hours in woods, so maybe, I guess, put your tent up, but obviously you've got to get permission from whatever the site is. And it's not always advisable to put your tent under a tree, especially if there's high winds forecasted. But if you get woodland air over a 48-hour period and cabin or something like that, that actually can boost your well-being for an amazing 6 months. So well worth doing if you can. And of course, our little reminder there is to remind ourselves that we're part of nature and not separate from it. Very important. So we're going to move to the final sense next, if you're interested, and that's to offer you a little bit of herbal tea. So it is an optional thing. Has it been out long? Has it still got a bit of warmth to it, or?
No, I only just put it out. It's
brilliant.
Had boiling water on it. It's actually made from blackberry leaves. I always keep some of the anywhere near for 25 years in my garden. And I discovered they are very good for cold, flu and diarrhoea, or preventing and stopping diarrhoea.
Yes.
Doing it too. And so I started to have it as a regular tea, and it doesn't go, it can stay for a flask like a whole day, it never goes bitter, it hasn't got tannin, and it's quite mild. So it's completely optional. If you'd like to try some, then
So for those of you at home, if you got the little memo this morning suggesting that you might like to bring a drink into the room where you're watching the screen, if you've got a hot drink, so much the better. But what we're going to do here is we're just going to suggest that you start by, before you start tasting it, to just hold the cup and just connect with the temperature of it, to just allow the temperature from the hot drink, if you've got a hot drink, because those of you at home may not have picked a hot drink, but if you have got one, I think you may find that the cup is quite cold and you can connect with the coldness of the cup if you picked a cold drink at home. But just, thank you very much, to just connect with it. And then the next thing to do is to try just sniffing it very gently. And you can try doing the 3 short sniffs and 1 long sniff if you want, or however you really want to. So just see what you get from the drink before you taste it. So this is like a precursor, because the interesting thing with that is our body will be deciding how it thinks it's going to taste. And that's quite interesting when you compare it to how it actually tastes. Probably not an exercise that we do very often, but as you know, this is a woodland drink as we've picked here. And for those of you at home, don't know if you could hear Katie because she wasn't near the mic, but this is bramble tea that she's created from the brambles in her garden, which haven't had any pesticides or anything unpleasant on them for at least 25 years. That's how long she's lived there. And it's very good for flu and colds and for helping if people are struggling with digestive issues such as diarrhoea. So it's a very easy tea to create. We haven't found anyone so far who's allergic to it, but if you are somebody who struggles with allergies, then suggest you take it easy with the first attempt, or just check with any other allergies you have and whether there's any crossover with this. But of course, brambles are an extremely available resource in our nature. And in fact, we've read somewhere that brambles can grow something like 6 inches a day. So even if you're regularly cutting it back, it'll soon be back. Yes. So anyway, if you felt that you gained something from the little sniffing exercise, now you can just very gently bring it up to your lips and just take a tiny little bit first and try and swill it in your mouth, feel it on your tongue. Might get a slight, hopefully it won't have burnt you, but it's definitely a sense of heat will be working its way through. And then when you're ready, feel free to drink it at your leisure. Small sips or whatever. And if you do swallow it down, it's quite an interesting little exercise to just follow how far you can feel the temperature, because all of these are just mindful exercises or mindful practices, if you like, that you can bring into your life if you want to just enable your mind to feel more in control. Leave you to finish off your drink there. And I think we're on to the final slide pretty much now, or final slides anyway. Oops. Don't worry, it happens sometimes. Right, so this is just a quick picture of Harry Edwards in the bluebell season. Isn't it beautiful? And they really do have a plethora of bluebells. And we are lucky that it's one of the sites that we can use. And if you want to see it at that time of year, then you need to go in April or May. Usually it's May. This year it was all over by the beginning of May. We had such a very, very hot March and April this year that by, I think, about May the 7th, they were pretty much gone. So yeah, we have to keep an eye on it. But if you're interested to come along and see these things, or to come on a forest bathing session with us, I'll have a slide at the end to say, do ask us if you want to go on our list, and we send out a monthly roundup of where we're working. The ones that are coming up in the next few months are, the next one we've got is actually this Sunday at Harry Edwards, and it is the full moon that day. So that one is part of a full day workshop, but you can just attend the afternoon if you want to, which is 1:15 to 4:15 in the grounds of Harry Edwards. And Harry Edwards is semi-ancient, private woodland, so we're very lucky. This is taken there, actually, this picture, but obviously there's no bluebells there at the moment. But it is a very lovely site, plenty of parking. So you can just attend the afternoon, or if you want to, the whole day is a moon event. So in the morning, we're doing a workshop on connecting with the moon and how the cycle of the moon between new moon and full moon and new moon, how that works with the body, the effect it has on the body, and how you can incorporate that into your lifestyle if you want to make the moon work for you, help support you. Then our other two sessions for the rest of this year there are 11 to 2, which is our most normal slot, actually. We do have to amend it sometimes because we share the site with a forest school, and occasionally they have parties there, so we sometimes have to adjust our times to not overlap with them. But on the whole, we work 11 till 2 because that gives people time to get there, not in the rush hour if they're coming from London and so on. So Sunday the 13th and Sunday the 4th there, and those are £35 sessions. So the full moon one is a little bit more because it's themed. And we also have other sites at Cannon Hill. We have one which is SW20. That's out towards Rains Park and Wimbledon area. And our next one there is 11 to 1:30 on Thursday, the 20th of October. And we have one at the Cosmon Sanctuary, which is in Tadworth, and that's sort of between Dorking and our next one there is 11 to 2 on Wednesday, the 26th of October. So there are ones between now and Christmas, but anytime we can arrange a private session if you would like. It works out more, of course, because we have to hire the site and arrange it with the venue providers, etc. But if there's a group of 8 to 10 of you, it can work out a similar cost, actually. Some people like to pay £300 and have one for themselves, or just with them and their partner, and we have had a few of those and they've gone very, very well, but it's a different market, obviously. And we do also offer corporate sessions, and we think it's something that's going to get more and more popular over time because it's utilising the natural resources that are around us. So it's a very beneficial way of allowing corporates to handle their mental health and physical health of their staff without incurring any damage to the local environment, if you like. Eco-friendly resource. Okay, so as we said, if you want to find out more, you can email us on katieandjoe@harmonyandnature.uk, or I also have Harmony Healing as well, so that's another option. And our website, harmonyinnature.uk, does actually list all of the events that we're doing, and that's the shop if you want to buy one of the sessions. And as I've said, we email out to people who are on our list. So if you want to sign up for that, let us know. And if you want to know about our corporate event brochure or private hire or anything, get in touch. That's it. Thank you. So any questions? We've got a slot for another 15 minutes, haven't we? Do you want to see if, I'll come back to you in a minute. Do you want to see if there's anybody online who wants to submit any questions? Yes, sorry.
No, I was just going to ask how you personally got to know him.
Thank you. Well, that's an interesting question. Thank you. So Gary and Olga, who started up the Forest Bathing Institute in 2016, roughly, they were already people who I knew. And in fact, they were local yoga teachers, and they ran various other sessions as well. So I knew them from that. And they actually used to live around the corner from me, in fact. So I knew them anyway. And when they first started offering forest bathing sessions in 2016, I went on one with them. So it was on my radar, if you like, as a really fun activity. And over time, they started to get more connected with it and to really put their effort into, as we said, UK research and setting up the institute. So once they started teaching people to be guides, I was interested. Katie was on the first ever one they did, which was 2018.
Yes, the end of 2000.
And I think there were 4 people on that course. And I was on one in 2019. There were 4 of us on that course. They've taught loads more people since then. It's become a lot more popular. But the funny thing is I already knew Katie. We'd met many times over the previous few years. And when we realised that we both trained in it, we decided to pool our resources. And, you know, we do work for the Forest Bathing Institute as well on a freelance basis, but Harmony in Nature is our own initiative. So that's our own business. Thank you, Brian. Did that answer your question?
Yes,
Thank you.
it's interesting.
Thank you. Anybody else? Is there anything from the audience there?
I was wondering.
You want to ask one? Okay.
No, I was wondering if
Go
much
on.
has been done with schools, because obviously it would be nice to educate them. Because I find I've got young children in lockdown, you drag them out, and they're like, I don't want to go. But of course, when they're in there, they find so many wonderful things to see, and I think it'd be, I don't know if anything's done, or it'd be a lovely thing. If the
Yeah,
schools-
I mean, actually, schools are on our radar, but it literally is a case of we can't do everything at once. So at the moment, a lot of the resources from TFBI are going on the government funding and the charities, etc., because schools are quite strapped for cash as well. But if any schools, and we have had 2 or 3 leads for schools locally, actually, one in Woking that was interested. So if any of you know of schools or know of a company or, you know, an organisation, even the Institute here, if you wanted to run a closed group session for members of the Institute, whether it's staff or you know, members who come along to the events, we could easily do that. So we're certainly open to discussing these things. With schools, I guess the person who needs to contact us is somebody with the authority for it to go ahead, because we don't have the resources to speak to people if it isn't going to go anywhere, to be honest. And the place that's asked us from Woking, it was a request from one of the chairman of the PTA or something like that, and he said, we have just put in a sensory garden in the grounds, and we could see that this could be a really interesting benefit. So that's a step in the right direction. But of course, the useful thing about schools is often they do have some grounds that might be suitable. So it's a question then of when do you do it? Is it for the students and is it during the school day? Or is it something that's done for the staff after hours? Or both? But we're certainly not averse to talking to people about it. Does that answer your question? Yeah?
I've got somebody with their hand up.
Okay, right.
We just need
Thank
to
you.
get them to unmute. So
Okay.
they're called iPad.
Very common then.
Just be more
It's just interesting because my daughter, who lives in America, she had a very corporate job and quite stressful, and she's very, very much into all this mindfulness. And every morning she used to get up about 5:30 and take her dogs into the woods for at least an hour. And she said that helped me to cope with my job. She said, you know, and she has just retired, but she said, that is, she does do yoga as well, but, her hour on her own in the woods makes, keeps her sane.
Lovely. Is it Maureen? Is that your name?
Yes, it is, yes.
Thank you, Maureen. Yes, I mean, we are often asked what's the difference between forest bathing and walking your dog, actually. So that brings me to a good point to mention that. But just to say that, yes, it's a fantastic resource. And lots of people, probably over hundreds of years, have realised that it's a good way of keeping their well-being under control. So in some ways, it seems almost crazy that it's taken us this long to formalise it and make it available. But thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad to hear it really helped your daughter. And if she was doing an hour, then that would give her plenty of time to take in those chemicals, which you would do whether you're walking with your dog or not. So we would certainly say there's going to be benefits from walking out there on your own with or without a guide, and definitely walking out there with your dog or dogs. The thing with dogs is they are very mindful. You, with your dogs, can be less mindful because generally you're thinking, what's my dog doing? Is it interacting with another dog? Is it running off? So the main difference between a session with us and taking your dogs out is that when you come with us, hopefully you can switch off completely from the life, if you like, and you can just allow us to take on that side of it, and you can just be really in an experiential place. But thank you for,
yes, that's perhaps why she goes to yoga as well. And she, you know, in America, it's a bit different. She has a yoga counselor that, you know, she gets in touch with occasionally, or she used to.
yes, that's obviously a private thing as well. Excellent. Could you all hear her question, by the way? Or her comment? It's more of a comment, really. But yeah, she was saying that her daughter lives in America, and she used to have a very stressful job, which she found it's very helpful to spend an hour each day out in the grounds with her dog. Okay, well, I think we finish in another couple of minutes, don't we? So I'm happy to take another question if there's any more.
Doesn't matter what sort of woodland.
Okay, well, again, because I'm not sure if the people on Zoom will hear the question. So the question from Georgina is, does it matter what sort of woodland it is? Well, in an ideal world, mixed woodland and ancient woodland. But you know what? Any wood is going to be helpful. And, you know, if you were to go in Japan, there are woodlands which are maybe almost all hinoki, for example, and that is a particularly fantastic tree. So if you happen to go to a woodland that's predominantly one tree that's really good for whatever your condition is, then it wouldn't matter. You see what I mean? So it's a very personal thing. I think at the end of the day, I would say pick somewhere that's convenient, local to you. It's not stressful getting there, finding somewhere to park or that you can walk to, you know, so all of those feed into the mix of whether it's a positive experience or not. That would be my advice. Does that answer your question? Thank you. I mean, can I just ask, does anybody, oh, sorry, do you want to ask?
Yes, just a quick question. When the wild anemones, is that a sign that it is a...
Actually, anemones are a sign of ancient woodland, as are bluebells. But, you know, there are lots of other indicators involved, and sometimes if it was just one or two isolated one, might only be that area that hasn't really been disturbed. But if you do know somewhere locally that does have the wild anemones, I'd say it's a good shout. Yeah, thank you. What's your name? Emma. Thank you, Emma. So, as I said, well, can I just ask, is there anybody here who's quite tempted, or maybe you've already been forest bathing, but is there have you been?
Yeah.
You've
I
been?
went to Canada. Actually, it's not something new for Asian.
Yes.
When I was a kid, you said that the history starts from 40-something years ago.
Yes.
But when I was a child, 46 years ago, I'm 46.
Yes.
We did it like every morning.
Yes.
It's like a heritage. And the Chinese doctor actually prescribed
Yes.
to quite a lot of patients, and both in a medical and a spiritual way.
Brilliant.
We talk about a lot of energy exchange with the tree.
Mm-hmm.
So all of your theory, you just talk in your language and in your way, but we have a very similar.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we've been a bit slow coming to it. That's the truth of it.
The north of Canada to see the northern lights, and we have a overnight camping in a hot spring next to the hot spring, just for forest bathing.
Brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant. Yes,
Forest
yes.
bathing, sorry.
Bathing. Yes. Well, we know what you mean, whatever you call it. No, that's fantastic. And I think the honest truth is that in our hearts, I mean, a lot of us, I'm quite a bit older than you, and I used to play outside a lot as a child. And I think the honest truth is that we maybe didn't realise it wasn't so formal, but definitely it was encouraged. And particularly, I was very lucky because I grew up in Oatlands, and we actually had the grounds of the old Oatlands forest that belonged to Henry VIII. I mean, we didn't own them, but they were, of course, but we were able to utilise them. And that was something that I did nearly every day with my sister, particularly in the school holidays when we didn't have school to go to.
Tell me in your way about scientific proof and everything.
Yes, yeah. The proof is in the eating, isn't it? So all the proof is really doing is justifying what we all knew anyway. But it, particularly here, the medical profession, they do like to see the evidence, and so it's important that we've got it. But yeah, no, I agree. I hope it becomes as popular here as it has in Asia. and that people remember in this country how we used to know innately to do it, but now it's become more formal. Okay, well, anyway, if any of you do want to give us your addresses, as I say, let me know and I will write them down. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today, and see you again another time. Thank you. Thank you. Very good.